How scapegoat survivors can stop solving old problems. If you grew up as the scapegoat child in a narcissistic family, then much of your early life was probably spent trying to solve problems that no child should have to face. These problems weren't about school, friends, or growing up. They were about survival in a household where love always came with conditions and connection would always be just out of reach. Today's video is about the legacy of those early problems and how the solutions that the scapegoat child had to create in childhood can become the very thing that keeps them stuck in adulthood. I'll address the two original problems that the scapegoat child initially faces, the creative but later costly solutions that the child will come up with, and third, how these solutions begin to cause problems of their own later. Then I'll explain what recovery can look like once the original problem is no longer present, but the old solution still is. Because that's when there's an opportunity to surrender trying to solve the old problem and make the old solution into the new problem. And that can become possible when you're in safe relationships today. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a practicing licensed psychotherapist in California and a scapegoat survivor myself. In my professional and personal experience, I found what I call the 3 pillars of recovery to be particularly effective in helping scapegoat survivors recover the quality of life that they deserve. And those pillars are, first, making sense of what happened so that you know it wasn't your fault. Second is to gain distance from narcissistic abusers today and closeness to safe people. And third is to live in defiance of the narcissist rules. And before we dive in, I want to let you know about a free ebook that I've created called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat. And if you grew up being unfairly blamed, criticized, or made to feel like you were the problem in your family, then this ebook can help you understand why that happened and how you can begin to recover from it. It explains why certain children get scapegoated, how that can affect your self-worth, and what healing can actually look like. If you've ever wondered, was it really me? Or was something deeply wrong in my family, then this guide can offer you the clarity and compassion to help. You can download it for free using the link in the description box below or by clicking here. The scapegoat child's 2 problems. If you were the scapegoat child in a narcissistic family system, then you were treated like you were the problem, whether directly or implicitly. But underneath that form of mistreatment is a deeper emotional reality that the child is facing a parent who cannot and/or does not love them. Not because the child is unlovable, but because the parent is incapable of providing this love. And this poses 2 impossible to solve problems for the child at the time. How do I get love from a parent who doesn't make me feel loved? Most children take for granted that their parent can and will love them. It's a biological expectation. But when that love is missing or only shows up under rigid conditions, the child has to work much harder to try to access it from the parent. The first major problem a scapegoat child has to solve then is, what do I need to do to be loved by my parent? To understand the gravity of this problem, it helps to understand the parent's limitations. A narcissistic parent isn't simply distracted or emotionally distant. They have to be much more invested in keeping their self-image intact as someone who's superior, dominant, and beyond reproach. This takes priority over the feelings of the people that they're supposedly in close relationship with. In fact, they tend to see the people they're in relationship with as extensions of themselves, not as separate individuals. So, if their child reflects well on them by, say, being obedient, flattering, or successful in ways that the parent values, then they may offer conditional approval to that child. But if a child asserts their own mind, draws attention to the parent's flaws, or simply becomes a repository for the parent's disavowed feelings of inferiority or inadequacy, then that child may be designated as the scapegoat. This scapegoat child isn't allowed to be loved for who they are or just how they are. The parent doesn't want to recognize the child's value because doing so would require recognizing that the child is not, in fact, the worthless person that their parent needs them to be. Problem number 2, how do I get this parent to value the love I give to them? Well, the second problem arises from the first. Not only is love absent from the parent toward the child, but the child's own love towards the parent goes unnoticed or devalued or dismissed. The child may bring care, loyalty, and even devotion, but these offerings don't seem to matter. Or worse, they get dismissed as manipulative, clingy, or weak. The narcissistic parent can be so invested in seeing the scapegoat child as defective that they can't allow themselves to experience the child's positive intentions and impacts. To do so, again, would disrupt the structure that the parent has created, where the scapegoat child represents everything the parent rejects in themselves. So the child's efforts to love the parent, genuine though they may be, do not register. And it's not because the child's love is lacking in any way, but because the parent has no use for it in this very, I would say, pathological schema. The scapegoat child's solutions. The only way to psychologically go on for the scapegoat child is to find a way to fit into their narcissistic parent's reality under these conditions. And they do so with the following solutions. First, the problem is me. I'm defective and undeserving. If the parent isn't giving love, the child may reason, there must be something wrong with me. Believing that you're the problem is often less terrifying than believing your parent can't or won't love you. If the problem is with you, then maybe, just maybe, it can be fixed. This solution leads the child to start striving for improvement by being more agreeable, hiding their true feelings, suppressing anger or needs, or performing in order to win approval. The child's hope is that someday, if they can just be less defective, that they will earn the love they crave so much from their parent. The second solution is, I can prove the value of my love by meeting my parent's every need. If the parent doesn't seem to value the child's affection, then the child may decide that their love just isn't good enough yet for the parent. Maybe they're not giving it in the right way, or maybe they're not trying hard enough. So the scapegoat child might redouble their efforts, and they can do this by anticipating the parent's needs, taking on emotional labor far beyond the child's years, or trying to be indispensable. The goal is to convince the parent of their love's value by showing that they are willing to do anything to meet the parent's needs. For the scapegoat child, this could involve agreeing with the parent about how bad you, again, supposedly are. In an abusive but convincing way, this may seem like the only way to please the parent. The child realizes that hating themselves lets their parent feel right, and that's the closest the child can get to seeing their love reach their parent. These solutions may help the child feel less powerless, but of course they come with a big cost. Well, let's look at an anonymized and fictional case example. Dana grew up with a mother who was volatile and often critical. If Dana would run to her mother with excitement about school, friends, or her drawings, which she loved to make, she'd be met with either cold indifference or sharp criticism. Dana determined that her mother's reactions meant that Dana's efforts were uninspiring. She decided that there was nothing about her to be excited about, so she no longer expected such a reaction from her mother. Dana held out unconscious hope that if she just expected nothing from her mother, then maybe her mother would see that she was being the way her mother wanted her to be and finally show Dana the love she so craved. It was a hope that burned within Dana throughout her childhood and adolescence. Tragically, though, it was never realized. Dana's mother showed no appreciation for Dana's attempts to show her love and affection. Dana recalled going to hug her mother when she was 5 years old and then getting scolded for trying to get out of a punishment by being cute. Dana grew suspicious then of her own impulses to show affection to her mother and to others. These displays seemed to carry no value to her mother, and so they must not to anyone else, or so she thought. Dana had to live in a world where she was unappreciated and had nothing to offer others. She decided that she might feel some value if she could meet a need of her mother. Dana saw that her mother liked to tell her friends about good things Dana did, even though her mother would never say this directly to Dana. So she decided to throw herself into her schoolwork to get A's that would let her mother tell more good things to these other adults about Dana. Dana had to give her all to make her mother feel better about herself, and this had to serve as the only form of love that could be expected. This lesson extended to her friendships, where she was always giving more than she received, and later to her romantic relationships, where she gravitated towards emotionally unavailable partners, repeating that same old effort that if I just love them enough, maybe I'll deserve their love in return, eventually. So Dana's solutions made her competent, generous, and driven, but they also made her deeply lonely and unsure of her worth. And these were not failures of character in any respect. They were just natural consequences of having to solve an impossible problem as a child, when the solution becomes the problem. As children, the solutions that scapegoat survivors create are often the only ones available. They help to keep a connection with a narcissistic parent, even if that connection is painful. But these strategies don't vanish once the child grows up. They continue, and over time they can stop working, or rather start working against the person who created them. And this is the point where old solutions become new problems. Well, let's return to Dana. In adulthood, she was successful at her job in accounting. She was attentive to detail, anticipated others' needs, and got praised for being reliable. But she found herself feeling invisible in her personal relationships. She noticed that her partners would expect her to take care of them emotionally, but rarely offer the same support in return. And whenever she tried to express her own needs, she worried that she was being too much or needy. At age 26, she decided to try therapy. She told her therapist that she was growing tired of doing everything that she thought she had to do, yet feeling like none of it was for her. She couldn't take pride in her successes at work and friendships, and relationships seemed one-sided. She and her therapist determined that her sense of self still felt organized around an old goal, to prove that she was not defective so that someone would eventually love her. But the people whom she found herself close to were more comfortable taking more than they give and weren't actually capable of loving her in the way that she needed. Her old solution, be perfect and meet everyone's needs but her own, no longer solved problems. That solution was creating them. What the old solutions interfere with? Well, when someone organizes their life around being lovable to an unloving parent, a number of important developmental goals get put on hold or deferred entirely. First, healthy self-esteem. If you grew up believing you're defective, you don't just feel bad about yourself, you structure your sense of self around not being enough. And that means accomplishments don't land, compliments don't stick, and relationships rarely feel secure, because deep down you still believe love has to be earned. Second, belief in your own effectiveness. Children who grow up feeling unworthy often struggle to believe that they can impact the world in meaningful ways. They may defer decisions to others, second-guess themselves, or underplay their abilities. If you spent your childhood trying to get someone else to validate you and it didn't work, then it's easy to assume that you're not capable of making things happen for yourself. The third cost are mutual, respectful relationships. When your blueprint for connection involves over-functioning, over-apologizing, or over-adapting, it can be hard to find relationships that feel truly mutual. You might settle for crumbs because that's what connection has always felt like. Or you might feel guilty when someone actually treats you well, because part of you might still believe that you haven't earned it. Why these solutions tend to persist? One of the most painful ironies in recovery is this. The more a survivor outgrows the need to solve that original problem posed by the narcissistic parent, the more painful the original solution becomes. But letting go of the solution can feel disorienting, because it's often tied to what has felt like reality for a long time. You may ask, if I'm not the one who helps everyone, then who am I? Or if I stop striving to be enough, what happens to my value? Or if I stop trying to fix my partner, are they going to leave me? These aren't irrational fears. They reflect the cost of rearranging your emotional life around a danger that no longer exists in an objective sense, but yet still governs how you feel. And that's why recovery from this form of abuse can involve more than insight. It typically needs to involve redefining a new problem, defining the new problem. The original problems, how do I get love from a parent who won't give it, and how do I prove that my love matters to them, are no longer solvable in adulthood. And not because you failed, but because they were never yours to solve in the first place. So what can become the new problem? Well, it could be this. How do I let go of the old solutions I created to solve a problem that no longer exists? And this reframing can change a lot of things in your life. Because now the goal isn't to finally earn the love you were denied, it's to stop organizing your life around that goal. How the 3 pillars of recovery can help. The process of redefining the problem and letting go of old solutions isn't something that happens all at once. It's something that unfolds over time with structure and support. And the 3 pillars of recovery can serve as a map for this process. So pillar number 1, or making sense of what happened, is sort of the first step in letting go of the old solution to see clearly why it was needed in the first place. This can involve understanding your parents' psychological limitations, naming the specific roles and rules you had to live by, and seeing how your beliefs about yourself were shaped in that environment. This is where survivors often feel that first wave of relief. You get to realize it wasn't that you were unlovable, but that you were trying to be loved by someone who wasn't capable of that. That shift alone can start to loosen the grip of the old solutions. Next is the second pillar, or moving away from narcissistic abusers and towards safe people. So once you understand the origins of your initial solutions, the next step can be to start living in a world that reflects a different reality. And that can mean identifying people who respect your boundaries, seeking out relationships and friendships where your needs are safe to express, and reducing exposure to narcissistically inclined people who might reinforce the need for those old solutions. This process is about retraining your nervous system to see safety, respect, and mutuality as normal, not threatening. It's where the old problem starts to lose its urgency because your environment no longer reinforces it. Pillar number 3, or living in defiance of the narcissist rules, can help you build a life that contradicts the old assumptions you had to adopt that led to those old solutions. So where you were once not allowed to speak your truth, you start to say what's true, again, in these new safe relationships. And where you once were told that your needs didn't matter, you might begin to start to care about them anyway. Or where you were once seen as defective, you can begin to build experiences that show otherwise. This is how old solutions are replaced, not just by insight, but also by action. You don't argue with the old solution, you live in contradiction of it. Tolerating uncertainty. Letting go of the old solutions doesn't just bring relief. It often brings a kind of quiet panic. Even when you know that those strategies are hurting you now, and even when you can see the cost, it can be hard to stop. So why might this be? Well, because those strategies gave you or lent you certainty. They told you who to be, what to strive for, and how to measure success. So without them, there can be a felt void. Like, if I'm not trying to prove my worth, what am I doing? Or if I'm not trying to fix people to get love, then how do I love? Or if I stop blaming myself for the past, then what do I do with all this pain? This uncertainty isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that something's becoming different, that you're no longer living under the auspices of the old problem. But the new problem, so to speak, doesn't yet have clear instructions, and your nervous system may protest. Why uncertainty feels dangerous? Well, for Scapegoat survivors, uncertainty was never just uncomfortable, it truly was dangerous. I mean, your safety depended on knowing how to be useful to a parent who couldn't see you as a separate person. That meant scanning for signs, suppressing your own impulses, and sticking closely to what was expected, even if it hurt. And so uncertainty about how to act or who to be could have led to being ignored, humiliated, or punished. So I think it makes sense that letting go of an identity organized around fixing, appeasing, or proving can feel terrifying. In many ways, this is a major act of defiance, to live without a script that your narcissistic parent would recognize. What this looks like in practice. Well, let's go back to Dana one more time. After months of working on identifying the old solutions, Dana decided to approach her friendships differently. Her friend Sarah seemed to take a lot more than she gave. Initially, when Dana brought up situations with Sarah, it was her therapist who openly wondered about whether Dana found this to be a reciprocal friendship. Dana initially was surprised that someone else would wonder if she was being taken care of well enough or not. But as she grew convinced that her therapist was sincere, she began to feel safe enough to question Sarah's contributions to their friendship. So in sessions, Dana more openly recounted how she felt like she was always the one reaching out, making plans, and offering support to Sarah. She realized with her therapist that she feared she'd be discarded if she didn't constantly prove herself useful to Sarah. But instead of acting on that fear this time, Dana decided to wait. She didn't text first, she didn't offer unprompted help, and Sarah actually reacted in a way that surprised Dana. Sarah eventually did reach out and this time asked Dana how she was doing. Dana realized that if she conducted herself in a way that showed she expected reciprocal care in their friendship, that Sarah would respond accordingly. It wasn't dramatic, but it was new, and it created a little more space to be someone other than who Dana had been taught to be. The importance of practice, with all due respect to Allen Iverson, if you're familiar, and if not, never mind. Letting go of the old solutions isn't a single moment of insight. It's something we all need to do again and again, especially in moments of stress, rejection, or vulnerability. That old problem may start to feel active again. For instance, let's say you get overlooked at work and suddenly you wonder if you need to work harder to prove you matter. Or your partner seems distant and the urge to fix, soothe, or overfunction returns. Or maybe you feel unsure of yourself and an old voice tells you that you're probably just being difficult or defective. The task isn't to banish these reflexes, it's just to notice them, perhaps remember where they came from, and gently return to a different path. And each time you do, the new solution gets stronger. A place to practice. My upcoming group class. Well, this kind of work is hard to do alone, and that's why I'm creating a live 8-week-long online course specifically for scapegoat survivors of narcissistic abuse. In this group, you'll find support in surrendering the ingrained instinct to solve the old problems posed by your narcissistic parent, both through the thoroughly researched information that I'll share and the tools provided, along with the felt sense of connection to the other students that I'll be facilitating to make sure that all participants get to have a safe experience of connection as they're learning. So all told, you'll gain new experience that signals you get to safely make your old solutions the new problem and then solve it by living from a basis of your adequacy and deservedness. You also get to experience what it feels like to be part of a community that doesn't run on shame or criticism. You'll be invited to try out new ways of being, ways that honor your story but don't confine you to it. So if you're interested and you'd like to learn when enrollment opens, you can find the link in the description box below or by clicking here. A final word. So the old solutions weren't mistakes, but they were rather creative responses to an impossible situation. They helped the scapegoat child survive. But now survival doesn't have to be the only goal. You get to outgrow the problems that you were once trained to solve, and you can notice when you're slipping back into them. You can also take steps to define new problems, ones that actually reflect the life you're living now. And from there, you can build a way forward that's not about proving you're worthy, but about being who you are without conditions and, again, most importantly, within the context of new, safe relationships. Well, with that, I want to thank you for watching this week's video and your continued support and engagement with this video and the resources around it. And I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.